Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and today I've got a complete run to show you, but it's a very short run. Short, influential, cult classic run. A comic that's not that easy to find, so even though it's a Marvel book, some of you may not have seen it before. And it is Gunhawks. Now, Gunhawks came out in 1972, written by Gary Friedrich, and it lasted just 7 issues. So I'm going to show you the complete run of Gunhawks and talk to you a little bit about the series. So here's issue 1. You can see it's got Reno Jones and Kid Cassidy. Now, the basic idea behind Gunhawks is pretty simple. It takes place shortly after around the Civil War, and Reno Jones is a formerly enslaved person, and he's on a quest to find his wife who is taken from him, and Kid Cassidy is the white guy that helps him. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, it may be because that's the plot of Quentin Tarantino's movie Django Unchained. Now, the specifics of the story are different, but the basic idea is the same. And that's no coincidence, because, in fact, Quentin Tarantino took the idea from Gunhawks. After the movie came out, after Django Unchained came out, Marvel put out a Gunhawks trade paperback collecting the series, I think. I say I think only because they did actually have a short revival of Gunhawks in the 2000s. So it could have been collecting that. I think it was collecting the original series. But either way, they put out a Gunhawks trade paperback. And in that, the introduction was written by Quentin Tarantino, talking about how this series influenced him to create Django Unchained. So here's issue 4. Now, again, there's a lot of differences between the movies and the series here. In the movie, Django Unchained, the formerly enslaved main character teams up with a German bounty hunter, right? In this case, Kid Cassidy, this gets very problematic on several levels. The origin story is a vibe, because Kid Cassidy is actually the son of the plantation owner that had enslaved Reno Jones. And the two of them grew up together, right? And so they're still best friends. There's a lot of sort of mythologizing about the South and the antebellum South in this series that goes somewhere between highly problematic and downright offensive. But it's a very interesting little series. Again, not easy to find. 7 issues is actually more than a lot of the series at this time. They were putting out a lot of new books around this time in 72, which I'm going to talk about in a second. And a lot of them only lasted like 3 issues, 4 issues, 5 issues. So getting to 7 issues is actually not that bad in the grand scheme of things, particularly launching a new Western in 1972. Here's issue 5. Now, sales were clearly slipping, and I should say that Gary Friedrich, again, I'm going to talk about this more in a minute, was not afraid to mix things up and put some, well, as we've just talked about, some controversial things in his comics, but specifically with the plotting, like he was not shy about doing some things that really boggled the mind. And one of those instances takes place here in issue 6, where Reno Jones, you can see on the cover, Reno's saying, "Kid, get up. You've got to get up. I didn't mean to." And then there's a Union soldier in the background saying, "He ain't getting up, cowboy, not ever again. You killed Kid Cassidy." Now, this seems like the kind of thing that would be one of these fake out covers that was, all comics do, but particularly at the time. But actually, it's not. This actually happens in the story. Kid Cassidy dies. And so with the last issue, they've changed the title of the series to just Reno Jones Gunhawk. So instead of, previously it was the Gunhawks, but now it's just Reno Jones Gunhawk singular, and it becomes a solo series. Now, this series started right around the same time as Luke Cage. Otherwise, you could be able to say that this is the first Marvel solo series featuring a black lead protagonist. But I think it's actually the second, depending on how you look at things, because, of course, Black Panther's series in Jungle Action was around the same time as well. But really interesting sort of development to kill off one of the lead characters, turn the book over to our black lead. It could have been very interesting to have a black main character leading in a Western. Of course, Dell had tried to do that several years earlier with Lobo, and they weren't able to get distribution because of racists, and they had to cancel the series after 2 issues because they couldn't get anyone to even carry the book. Marvel had a lot more clout, but this was the only issue that came out that's just the Reno Jones Gunhawk solo, and then the series ended. Now, the thing that's really interesting to me about this is just looking at Gary Friedrich's year as a whole. Because in 1972, Gary Friedrich came out with 3 new titles for Marvel. The first of those was Combat Kelly and His Deadly Dozen, which actually began spinning out of a storyline in Sergeant Fury that he wrote. And that, of course, was a direct ripoff of the movie The Dirty Dozen. Like, just blatantly stealing that concept. Then we have this here, Gunhawks, where, of course, in turn, he had his story completely ripped off for Django Unchained. The third series that Gary Friedrich launched in 1972 for Marvel was Ghost Rider. Obviously, of the 3, was the one that took off and became super popular. Friedrich famously, 40 years later, didn't get any money from the Ghost Rider movies that Marvel put out, and he sued Marvel, saying that he had created the character before he was working for Marvel and brought the character to Marvel, and therefore it wasn't work for hire and he was owed money. Now, he lost that case, but it's interesting to look at those 3 different series that he launched that year, which all have a very different relation to movies, but also sort of show in different aspects this sort of creative push and pull of, not even in a legal sense, but in a creative way of who owns ideas. Like the fine line between being inspired by an idea and ripping off an idea. You could say, I mean, for me, I think Django Unchained has the same basic idea, but is executed very differently. So to me, that's more of a being inspired by an idea. Combat Kelly and His Deadly Dozen is closer to me to being just a straight ripoff. And then also, but then you get into the legality of it. Like, who owns ideas? In a creative sense, you would say is the creators, but legally, of course, Marvel was determined eventually to have the legal rights to Ghost Rider, even if they might not have the moral creative rights to the character. So it's very interesting. I've always kind of wanted to do a deeper dive on the 1972 production of Gary Friedrich for this reason, because these 3 examples of the stories and how they are inspired by and then inspired other creative works, specifically in movies, I find fascinating. But it's an interesting little series. Again, has some stuff in it that could be quite offensive to certain people, myself included. But also some really interesting stuff. I think Gary Friedrich's work is kind of underrated. It's not always great, but he does push the envelope in some interesting ways. Now, at some point, if I can find them, I'm going to show you the complete run of Combat Kelly. Don't think I've done that. I can't remember if I did. I'll take a look at my previous videos and see. I was just looking real quick. I'm not sure what I did with them. That series ran for 9 issues, and it has like the last issue is even more shocking an ending than this one to the series. Friedrich realizing that the story was up and really going out with a crazy bang. So it's just fascinating to me to look at his 1972 production with these new series he put out, starting again here with Gunhawks, a really sort of very interesting cult classic series that's sort of gotten more important and more interesting as the years have gone by. So let me know what you think down below, and I'll see you next time.